Ocean Colour Scene went through a lot. In their first sprint, they morphed from press darlings to label-less failures, only to re-emerge in the late stages of Britpop to become commercial heavyweights. They were a band that luxuriated in Britain's rock past, the warm fuzz and ragged pop harmonies of the Rolling Stones, Small Faces, and early Fleetwood Mac. They took those retro pieces and conjured something entirely fresh for the cool Britannia generation, and yet the press were keen to clobber them with a death sentence to their credibility, the band who were dad rock before their time. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of the Riverboat Song. Ocean Colour Scene came together in Solihull in Birmingham in August 1989. Before then, the members had been in various bands with varying levels of local success. Drummer Oscar Harrison had been in the Brum reggae combo Echo Bass, guitarist Steve Craddock in the mod revivalist The Boys, and singer Simon Fowler and bassist Damon Minchella had been in the C86-inspired indie band The Fanatics. The event that brought them together and made them change tact was when the four members saw the Stone Roses play Birmingham's Irish Centre in June 1989. The Stone Roses kicked open a lot of doors in this country. It suddenly became a realistic option to play outside your local pub, because bands of a similar ilk were becoming important and valid. That's important because we needed to feel like it wasn't just for ourselves, that we could play outside our bedrooms. We were lucky the way things worked out. I always thought we were doing something worthwhile, so I didn't spend a lot of time hoping and praying that Mr. Big would pull up in a limo at the Hare and Hounds and say, "You shall go to the ball." It wasn't quite that simple, but a local Mr. Big by the name of John Mostyn took them under his wing. Mostyn had made his name working with the Specials and Fine Young Cannibals, amongst others, and was impressed enough with OCS to form a label specifically to release their music. The annoyingly named Fit Records. It also helped that newly written songs like One of These Days and first single Sway had an ideal mix of 60s harmonies and 90s funk for the current Manchester moment. Their momentum kept building after they played Sway on seminal youth entertainment show The Word. Its chorus a call to arms for this up-and-coming band. By their second single, March 1991's Yesterday Today, the UK music press couldn't get enough, positioning Ocean Colour Scene as the next big thing. One hapless journo even calling them everything the Beatles nearly were. When they entered Paul Weller's Solid Bond Studios in April to record their debut, with a buzz of hype surrounding them and Rolling Stones producer Jimmy Miller in tow. Things were looking up for the young band. That was until they weren't. As Miller introduced the band to the dangerous concept of drinking and toking in the studio, the vibes were spot on, but the demos were messy. Craddock admits that the vocals took a hit from Fowler being a bit too sozzled most of the time, so they went back to the studio later in 1991 with Hugo Nicholson, who'd co-produced Primal Scream's Screamadelica. However, at that point, Fit Records had sold Ocean Colour Scene's contract to Fontana, a 60s label that had been resurrected by Polygram to fit the ego of A&R man Dave Bates. Bates loved what he'd seen of Ocean Colour Scene, but now in control of the band's career, he wasn't thrilled with the Nicholson demos, feeling they lacked the band's live intensity. So they went back for a third time, this time with Tim Palmer, mixer of Pearl Jam's 10. At some point during all this, Steve Osborne, co-producer on the Happy Mondays Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches, had a bit of a bash too. By the end, no one was happy. Their self-titled album was released in May 1992. Though they'd been signed to capitalize on the Manchester bubble, that had since burst. The music of the moment was now grunge. Despite their early next big thing status, the record got a kicking from the press, many calling them late to the bandwagon opportunists. And because of the confused production, its overall sound just didn't fit the band. Craddock joked that it sounded like it was sponsored by a reverb company. None of the album's singles charted on the top 40. As they'd shat the bed in the UK, the label attempted to relaunch the band in the US. So, through late 1992, the band played 28 cities in 7 weeks, often supporting the Fontana dream pop double bill of Catherine Wheel and House of Love. They had a good time, perhaps too good a time. Fowler ending up in hospital after a particularly heavy night. And then they were back to try and record album 2. But again, it was hell. The band feeling they were being forced by the label to follow current trends. And according to them, Bates just did not hear the radio viability of what they were writing. I remember him being on his knees and saying, "I don't think you understand how to write singles. And we never once said we could write singles." No group comes up to someone and goes, "We got 4 smash singles here." Groups don't f***ing know. It was here that communication broke down. The band wanted out. And that is when the lawyers got involved. I'm excited to be teaming up with VoiceMap to bring you an exclusive audio walking tour of Birmingham. Roll the tape! Birmingham. Always celebrated for its excellence. An industrial powerhouse in the centre of Britain, with more canals than Venice, the birthplace of Cadbury's chocolate, with a fondness for bull statues. It's also the home of metal. Come to Birmingham and join me, Trash Theory, in tandem with VoiceMap, for an audio walking tour around the city's rock and metal past. Let me guide you through its important venues, which fostered bands like Black Sabbath, Duran Duran, ELO, Ocean Colour Scene, and more. Experience the sights, the sounds, the smells of Britain's second city, the Crown, the Rum Runner, and the Caribbean-themed restaurant where Eddie's used to be. VoiceMap produces audio tours of all your favourite cities. New York, Paris, Birmingham. All their tours are written and voiced by knowledgeable local storytellers, like me. So you'll get to see the sights and learn on your way. It works using GPS autoplay, so you can focus on your surroundings. Simply put in your headphones, tap start, and let VoiceMap guide you. If there's one club in the history of Birmingham I would have loved to be alive to enjoy, it would be here. The Clash played here in November 1976. So when you're next in Birmingham, check it out by using the link voicemap.me/BrumRockTour, all one word. Birmingham, a whole lot more than Ozzy Osbourne. The band wanted to sever their contract with Fontana, but Fontana felt that the band owed them. And the amount owed was significant. The label had bought out their contract with Fit Records for a 6-figure sum, plus 4 sets of studio costs, and anything else that the band had racked up in the couple of years they were signed. We had an 11-month legal battle with them to walk out of the contract throughout 1993. During that time, we couldn't record. We couldn't even play a gig in our local pub, because the contract we had was so terrible. Ultimately, that was why we were able to walk out the deal. It was ridiculous. We owed them £500,000, plus the £600,000 they bought us for. That's a lot of money, so they certainly wanted us to stay. But we walked. As the band's current lawyer had ties with the label they were fighting, they thought it a wise move to get someone else. Michael Thomas was Peter Gabriel's lawyer, and from prior dealings with him, hated Dave Bates. So much so that Thomas would work pro bono to free Ocean Colour Scene from their contract, overlooking outstanding debts by citing 11 points of breach of contract. Now unattached, they thought they'd soon be able to get a new deal. The problem was their debut album had failed to sell. They'd spent a year not gigging and so lost all momentum, were basically forgotten about by the listening public, and sadly were playing music that was painfully out of fashion. And don't forget the name. The name didn't help. Their manager, Steve Craddock's father, Chris, would shop their demos around labels, and the first question would invariably be, Are the band willing to change their name? It was also around this time that the elder Craddock had to remortgage the family home to pay the band's mounting debts, ending up losing the house and declaring bankruptcy. Their saving grace emerged from one of Craddock's mod heroes. Paul Weller had been a fan of their debut single Sway, and had met the band when they were recording with Jimmy Miller at Weller's studio. Weller liked Craddock's chops and asked him to provide additional guitar on The Weaver on his 1983 Wildwood album. This soon transformed into Craddock becoming part of his touring and session band. Then, a year later, to Minchella also joining, with Fowler doing the occasional acoustic solo support slot. It kept them afloat. In addition to this, Liam Gallagher heard the new demos that Ocean Colour Scene had been working on. They'd first met the Gallaghers at a Birmingham pub gig in 1984, a little before Oasis released Supersonic. I need to be myself. Craddock would then periodically bump into the brothers at Weller's shows. After hearing their new stuff, Oasis invited the band out as support on the Live Forever tour. While the nation may have briefly forgotten about the band, these connections to two of the hottest properties in the emerging Britpop movement helped them re-enter the public eye. It was all coming together again. We played a bit, and then Go Discs got interested in us, and gave us a 16-track as a Christmas present. And a bit later, we got a publishing deal at the same time as Dexy's Midnight Runners' old studio came up for sale. We just thought, instead of wasting all this money on drink or drugs, why don't we do something useful with it? So we bought the place for 80 grand and put our 16-track in it. And that became the Moseley Shoals studio. Despite the name Moseley Shoals, the studio wasn't in the leafy South Birmingham area of Moseley, instead in the more central Five Ways. It was named as a play on the legendary Alabama-based soul studio, Muscle Shoals, and Moseley was just where they'd spent most of their teenage Friday nights drinking. The first album they recorded there would be named after the studio. Moseley Shoals would be recorded piecemeal through 1985. Taking 8 weeks total, sessions were scheduled between Craddock and Minchella touring, and the availability with Paul Weller producer, Brendan Lynch. Having found that he was unable to write songs when depressed, Fowler managed to conjure up the first 10 songs for the album in the fortnight after being freed from Fontana's clutches. Most of the songs recall his adolescence, nostalgic odes to good times past, but there is an aching sadness that seeps through the positivity. The Circle was supposedly the quickest song he ever wrote, its chorus alluding to a feeling of being left behind, observing others as they excel. Perhaps he's evoking the band's state of stasis, his bandmates being away touring without him. Or his own personal separation from everyone else. All could apply. Though Fowler was adamant that it wasn't, when he brought Lining Your Pockets to the group, he worried that Craddock might feel it was aimed at him, and not their former predatory label. While Craddock was out on tour, Fowler struggled, and even sold his record collection for beer money. Anything for a momentary respite from the inaction, the big wait, his parents asking when he'd be getting a real job. I remember when Steve first joined Paul's band. I'd be sitting home on the dole in this fucking freezing cold house, writing songs, and he'd be off playing gigs all around the world. And him doing that was the only good thing in my life. And it really was fantastic, because I knew that no matter how bad things were for me, Steve was still having a good time, and that no matter what, one day we'd get the band back together again. Musically, the album leans in on the retro British rock influences, the Nick Drake folkisms of Fleeting Mind.
As simple as a kettle, steady as a rock. Though my fleeting mind is nowhere.
40 Past Midnight, consciously snatching the piano hammering groove of the Stones' Let's Spend the Night Together.
Don't you worry about what's on your mind.
and the Steve Marriott hollers on The Day We Caught the Train. The latter, a joyous remembrance with aspirations of anthemia, was inspired lyrically by The Who and Quadrophenia, especially the track 515, where protagonist Jimmy gets stoned on the train on the way to Brighton. Fowler has said that it also serves as a tribute to their former producer Jimmy Miller, who passed in 1994. Most listeners got their first tastes of Moseley Shoals from opener and lead single The Riverboat Song. It's built around a searing Craddock riff, a bluesy three notes that he wrote on a bass that reminded him of the fluid simplicity of Ray Charles's What Did I Say and Booker T in the MG's Green Onions. He wrote it in a state of anger, and it gives the album a confrontational quality from the off. A punch to the face that reads as, "You were all wrong to underestimate us."
It's more or less the same as the things that you said.
And with his lopsided 6/4 swing, is also one of the few Britpop era moments outside of the Stone Roses' Love Spreads that is indebted to Led Zeppelin and early Fleetwood Mac. This swampy psychedelic muscle for Fowler conjured scenes from Apocalypse Now, the soldiers drifting down the river, the taut tension before an upcoming attack.
For all the things you said, tell me why does the river run red?
Ocean Colour Scene were aided on this odyssey by Weller, who provided the blues organ touches as the song reaches its climax, further confirming the Modfather's seal of approval.
Where the riverboats sway beneath the sun is where the river runs red.
Recording the track was a microcosm for the sessions, keeping it old school, recording to half-inch tape and capturing it live, with limited overdubs and a beer-off-free in the system. When it came to recording, we'd turn up at 11 AM, spend a couple of hours playing cards, then get stuck into it. We'd be drinking all day, smoking spliff, having a whale of a time. I used my gold Les Paul for the solo on that track. It's exciting, but it's really rough and ready. There are at least two huge mistakes where I falter and f*** up, but I just carry on. It was a time when everything wasn't scrutinized as much as it is in the studio today. It was rawer, a bit more like a live performance, where you don't get to change things, which is a good job, because otherwise I'd have to go back and work out a proper solo. The Riverboat Song was released in February 1986, their first new music in 4 years. By now they were signed to MCA, who were apparently fine with their name. The third part of the trifecta that factored into Ocean Colour Scene's resurrection, alongside Paul Weller and the Gallaghers, was Radio 1 DJ Chris Evans. He bombarded his weekday breakfast show with the track, invited the band to play it on his new Channel 4 talk and live music show TFI Friday, and then installed the track as the show's permanent guest introduction theme. As such, not only was the Redboat song the band's first single to break the UK top 20, hitting number 15,
All the things you've seen. Tell me when will your river run green?
it also meant that when Moseley Shoals came out 2 months later, it entered the album chart at number 2. It would end up remaining on the chart for 92 weeks, and went 3 times platinum in the UK. Less than 2 years later, in February 1998, Moseley Shoals would be voted 33rd best album of all time by readers of Q magazine, placed just below The Clash's London Calling, just above Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. They had more than proven the naysayers and their previous label wrong. After Moseley Shoals, they were flying, Fowler and Craddock being so juiced by success that songs were just flowing out of them. In 1997, they released a full album of B-sides, C-sides and free rides, before their third studio album, Marching Already, in November. Its driving lead single, 100 Mile High City, would be their joint highest charting single ever, alongside The Day We Caught the Train the previous year, both reaching number 4. And proving just how big they'd become, March In Already would enter the UK chart at number 1, knocking Oasis's Be Here Now from the top spot. Noel Gallagher sent them a plaque to commemorate their achievement, reading, "Congratulations to the second greatest band in the world." That album's third single, another top 10 smash, was Better Day. Originally written in that 2-week flurry of creativity that followed their exit from Fontana, but left off Moseley Shoals, it was, at the time of writing, a slightly bitter thumbing of the nose to those that had stood in their way. After their number 1 album, it felt like a victory lap. It's just top that Better Day is gone on this album, because it's about all of the people who thought we were shit. And now they come up and say, "Oh, we've always loved you." F*** off, no you didn't. You and all the rest thought we were wankers. But I don't give a monkeys now. It's just a badass tune, isn't it? The band epitomised the mood of 1996 and 97, while Britpop had brought in an appreciation for classic British pop, from The Kinks, The Jam, XTC and The Smiths. Late 90s Britain saw a bunch of bands that rejected everything since punk, concocting a retro fuzz rock, rousing the ghosts of the Stones, Small Faces, The Who and The Beatles for the modern era. What people are appreciating again is the mood of the song, no matter when it was released. There's this idea that anything that was released before Anarchy in the UK is just old-fashioned, that taking an influence from anything before then is retrogressive. That's just bollocks. Oasis were leading the charge, and anyone that Noel Gallagher befriended and gave the nod to, his fans sought out.
I got a sandstorm blowing in my head, seeing many colors, but the only one coming through is red.
Wake up, it's a beautiful morning. Feel the sun shining for your eyes. When you make your mind up, tell me where it is you want to go. I don't care. No, I don't care. Chasing rainbows all the time.
The press started calling this little boys club Noel Rock after its catalyst. So interlinked with the Gallaghers, Ocean Colour Scene were picked as mid-afternoon support for Oasis's landmark Nebworth shows. Noel Rock, through and through. But more damning, they got tagged with the term Dad Rock, one word, derogatory. Nowadays, usually the term Dad Rock, hyphenated, no value judgment, is a retrospective classification, like classic rock. Though bands can be inspired by classic rock, no one makes contemporary classic rock. It only applies to music that is 2-3 decades old. Dad rock similarly is music that is 20-30 years old, that one's father would have listened to in his youth. Extra points if it evokes the now absent feeling of being young and free. But dad rock in this context didn't really become popularized until the late 2000s, and Rob Mitchum's 2007 review of Wilco's Sky Blue Sky. The UK music press coined the term specifically to bash Ocean Colour Scene. They felt the band was so subservient to their 60s influences, It was rock music that your dad could enjoy. It was basically the Faces again. They weren't moving things forward, they had their ears fixed on the past, additionally earning them the unkind nickname Ocean Dullacine. The band were not fans of either, their defense being that they were simply making the music they wanted to make. Dad rock, right? Whatever cunt came up with that can go and suck his ass. The blues, right? It's an everyday emotion that's almost supposed to be caned out of you. With rhythm and blues, people will dance away their blues. People who try and say it's old-fashioned don't understand that basic release, and they have to go pay shrinks or they end up f***ing mad. Simon calls it folk music, and I call it R&B, but we're saying the same thing basically. The Enemy took it even further. In March 1998, after several years of berating the band, the Scene were no longer willing to talk to the magazine. In fact, the front of the LP cover of their B-Sides album had a veiled dig at the UK's top-selling weekly. So the Enemy did a feature where they went to Ocean Colour Scene shows and quizzed fans about why they were here, to find out what kind of people could possibly like them. Their beginning hypothesis being that the average Ocean Colour Scene fan was a 40-plus beer-drinking former mod, decked out in Fred Perry. It's an odd piece. Jim Worth's conclusion was that for the most part, Ocean Colour Scene fans were simply kids, excited to be reliving an era they didn't experience, i.e. the 60s, as well as rebelling against the post-punk tastes of their parents' generation. But so burnt by the fickleness of the press, it became part of their legacy. In 2003, when the band released their sixth album, North Atlantic Drift, it came with the following self-deprecating press release. Always on the outside looking in, OCS have survived 15 years of abuse and derision. Journalists lashed back with the label Dad Rock. They have remained steadfastly uncool. How much are this band loathed, and how venomously detested. But for those that love them, screamed the oh la las at the top of their lungs, learnt guitar by picking out the riff for the Riverboat song, bought a bucket hat or scooter to emulate their idols. They didn't care. Ocean Colour Scene had been through hell, and came out the other side with a clutch of Britpop anthems that feel like a holiday. In 2014, they were voted 4th best Birmingham band by Birmingham Mail readers, behind only Black Sabbath, Duran Duran, and ELO. Not too bad for a dad rock band. Thanks for watching. Who is your favourite Birmingham band? Comment down below and check out that walking tour if you're in the area. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and why don't you also share it with a couple of people? It really does help. As always, I'd like to shout out this month's new top tier supporters over on Patreon, Ryan Shelby and Sir Binky, and thanks to everyone that supports me. And I'll see you next time for the Patreon poll winner from 4 months ago.